My name is Professor McGill, and I'm the organizer of the conference. I want to say a couple of words of gratitude to the president of our university, who inspires us as a presidential conference, who leads us forward towards excellence, and his vision and leadership is very welcome and very much appreciated. The conference committee is made up of very, very fine professors from across the university to give us the interdisciplinary flair. But I want to give a very special word to a woman at the back here who's busy photographing people. Her name is Glory Smith. If you could give her a special applause, please. Glory always stays in the background, but she's a very long shadow behind a highly complex conference. It takes a year to plan, and without her amazing organizational skills, we just could not do it. And what most people don't know is that this is not in her job description. This is her weekend work. She does this as a service to the university, so all the more are we blessed. And thank you, Glory. And you see so many of our students, our Duquesne students, helping at the tables and ushering and helping people around. So a wee word of thanks to all of our students. Thank you very much indeed. Now it's my pleasure to introduce this next speaker, Bishop Neto, who will be introduced by our provincial Jeff Dwayne. But again, let me emphasize that our conference is a superb way of celebrating the spirit and mission of Duquesne University. Part of the spirit and mission is to nurture the integrity of creation, and that's the overarching theme of our conferences. This is the third conference, and it's on the global water crisis. Each year we'll have a different topic. The idea of the integrity of creation was taken up by Pope Francis and his encyclical, his environmental encyclical called Laudato Si. So it's just wonderful that that ethos of the spirit and mission has now very much become part of the universal ethos of the Catholic Church through the encyclicals of Pope Francis. And we use that now on an annual basis to shape our conference, to select our topics and choose our speakers. So it's with great pleasure I now introduce the Provincial of the Spiritans in this region, Provincial Jeff Dwayne, to come up and say a few words about the next speaker, Bishop Neto.
Good afternoon. And I just want to take a moment to thank Duquesne University and President Gormley for continuing to sponsor this symposium. It's a wonderful effort. It just continues to improve and focus on key issues for us as a congregation and for the university, and making hopefully a significant contribution in the topics that we're addressing. I thank you to Jerry and his committee for the wonderful work that they have done to coordinate this and to make this possible. It really is a wonderful opportunity. So thank you, Jerry. I was struck listening to the presentation so far how we have been doing a little bit of a tour around the world. Last night, Dr. Nancy Love talked about her experience and work that she's doing in Flint, but she connected with work that she's doing in Ethiopia as well. And it was interesting to hear the connections there and the relationships. And then this morning we had a wonderful presentation about water security and water issues in Saudi Arabia. Today, this afternoon, we're going to begin with the presentation for a speaker who has been working in the Amazon in Brazil for more than 50 years. So we jump now to another continent. The only continent we might be missing eventually is Asia. Perhaps if we had more time, we might be able to get to that. But truly, it shows the importance of how this is a global issue. And there's an issue that connects all of us. When Spiritans meet, and when I go around to visit different missions and meet our confreres working throughout the world, one of the first questions we ask when you arrive at a Spiritan house or community is the water safe to drink? And I thought of that last night when Dr. Love was talking about water quality. Now, the second most important question that we ask now when we arrive at a new community, what is your Wi-Fi password? But water is still the key one, and that's what connects us all. And when I had the opportunity to visit many of our missions, whether in Africa or in Asia, I find that our confreres are very involved in issues around development, and issues of water quality and access to safe water is always a critical part of what we're doing as Spiritans, whether it's drilling new wells, capping sources, providing opportunities for the people that we're serving and working with to have access to clean water. It's a very important part and critical part of our ministry. And today we will have the opportunity to hear from Bishop Mario Clemente Neto, who's been working in the Amazon for more than 50 years and has had a tremendous amount of experience in terms of organizing the people that he works with to be able to provide for themselves and have access to the water and other water issues. And I'll let him tell his story about what that means. But this is a very brief background on Bishop Mario. He is from Brazil originally, has been a priest for more than 50 years, 51 years I believe, since he's been ordained, studied in Rome and got some training there. Was named bishop at the age of 39, very early in his ministry, and was named to be bishop of one of the most difficult regions in Brazil, and in the prelature of Tefe. And Tefe, they tell me, I've never had the opportunity to visit there myself at this point, but tell me is one of the most difficult regions with multiple challenges from many sides, geographically, in terms of isolation, in terms of socially and politically, and in terms of religious issues as well. And Bishop Mario has been working in that area, Tefe, for, like I said, more than 50 years, and has been very much involved in community organizing. As you know, in South America and throughout much of Latin America, based Christian communities are an important part of sharing and proclaiming the gospel, building Christian communities and empowering people to have to take the responsibility for their own lives and finding ways to help the people themselves to provide for what they need. One of the issues in the Amazon that Bishop Mario has been working with deals with the extractive reserve model, which is a model that aims to focus on conservation efforts, to enable people to use resources and conserve them, but to use them for their development of the community. And he has a tremendous amount of experience in that area, and will share, I'm sure, this afternoon some of that experience. He is retired as a bishop at the age of 60, but he did not retire in his ministry. He continues to be a parish priest in the area of Tefe still, and a local community of Fonte Boa, where he continues to organize the community and advocate for the rights of the Amazonian people and the continuing proclamation of the gospel through his missionary call. Don Mario is known as a Francis bishop before there was even such a thing as Francis bishops. He's very simple, very dedicated and committed to the people that he serves. I'm told that he doesn't have a vehicle, he doesn't have a car. He gets around on bicycle where he needs to go and land, and then by boat, because much of the ministry in the Amazon is on the rivers. And so he was living that, has been living that whole concept of being a Francis bishop, working with the people, having the smell of the flock, and being at the service of the people, his whole ministry. So we're indeed very blessed and privileged to have Don Mario with us here this week, and to have him to share his experience around this issue of the global water challenge that's before us as a community. So thank you and welcome to Bishop Mario.
Thank you. I'll take it. All right. think. It's on. So thank you for the words said by our provincial. When I was invited to come here to this conference, my objection was that I am not a specialist on the question. All I could do is to talk about our experience there, some in preservation and work with people. They said that would do. One difficulty is that my English is so bad, but I will try. I will be a bit tied to the paper, and with the help of some slides, many of them I took myself, then I hope I can communicate what I prepared. Well, there are two sides from which we can look at the Amazon region. From one side, demanding the preservation to take place, and from inside, from the point of view of those who must put preservation into practice, and those who suffer preservation with all its social, economic, legal, and political consequences. My contribution will be trying to share our experience of living the second side of the question. Above all, I will report the experience of our communities in the prelature of Tefé and raise some questions for reflection. So we have the two sides, the side of people living there and those who want the region to be preserved as important region for the climate. The prelature of Tefé, where we live, is a spirit and mission. A prelature is a unit of the Catholic Church, headed by a bishop, and similar to a diocese. Tefé is located right in the heart of the Amazon, as you can air a photo, and then the localization of Tefé. So it's located right in the heart of Amazon, halfway between Manaus, the state capital, and the borders of Peru and Colombia. Its area is very large, more or less 4 times the area of the state of Pennsylvania. One thing that difficult our work up there is the distance. For instance, to compare the bishop here in Pittsburgh, I believe in 1 or 2 hours, or 2 hours, he reaches any parishes. But there, the first parish is 2 hours away. The second is 7 hours. Where I am working now, Fontibon was called, is 20 hours away from Tefé, because we go only by boat. There is no roads. That is one problem I will speak afterwards, the communication. And there is one parish that is 10 days from Tefé. So to visit is quite a distance, as you can see. I will try to share our experience in preservation and that we try to practice out there. The Amazon basin. There, Tefé is in the Amazon, as you know. In the Amazon was, you know, too, is a largest forest and the largest concentration of fresh water in the world. The basin area is 2.7 million of square miles, more than 70% of United States area. The volume of water it produces or discharges in the ocean is a huge amount, would be 640 around million or billion of cubic feet a day. And the United States, it seems, if I'm right, 6.7 billion cubic meter a day. Then it would be nearly 1,000 times. They will need for the whole United States, the consumption of water. 50 years ago, the Catholic Church had a very important experience of General Assembly to evaluation and planning. It was the Second Vatican Council. We can live faith and religion looking towards heaven, back to the people, so to say. It is a kind of egoistic religion, looking out to our own comfort and salvation. But Christ's only commandment is, love your brothers and sisters. I was thirsty, and you gave me to drink, as Christ said. One of the questions studied in the council was exactly the church attitude towards the realities of this modern world, looking at them more positively and deciding to give her contribution on transforming this world into a better place for everybody. Shortly after the council, the bishops of Latin America assembled in Medellin, Colombia. They sought to apply the decision of the council to the reality of Latin America. A very nice city, as you can see. They took this conference the conscience. They perceived that the people of the continent was one of the largest number of Catholics in the world, living with enormous social industries in archaic social structures in which a minority controlled wealth and power at the expense of very poor majority. In this conference, the church decided to put herself in the side of poor people and struggle for their liberation of this unjust situation. She made, as I said, a preferential option for the poor. It was the beginning of the theological reflection known as liberation theology. You see there Gustavo Gutierrez, a Peruvian theologian, one that is the exponent on this theology. In Brazil, the church, following the same line, made an effort to change her own structure, opening up a great space for the lay people. This was done mainly by the formation of small communities, Christian communities, which gave the opportunity for more people to take active participation in church structures. Church in Brazil took even more and more a position of resistance against the military dictatorship that ruled the country. Like in nearly all Latin American at that time, the military government were supported by the United States with the excuse of fighting communism. The same thing happened to Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay, and so on. The Bishop Paulo Evaristo Arns, that you see in the photograph, the first one, he is from São Paulo, along with other bishops, became internationally known for his courageous commitment in combating torture and defending human rights. You see after Paulo Evaristo, you see to Romero, Bishop Romero from El Salvador. He said, it is not God's will for some people to have everything and others to have nothing. He was killed by the military government at that time. In Brazilian Amazon region too, the bishops met in the city of Santarém, state of Pará, and decided to promote more participation of people in the church and society extra-church. You see a nice photo. You see the two colors of water, the Solimões, the Amazon River, the yellow water, and the Xingu River. It's very interesting, that question of colors of water. And this meeting, they decided to the creation of basic Christian communities as much as possible and give their support for the cause of indigenous people. The prelature of Tefé had a tradition of supporting people, especially those in difficult situations. At that time, there was no government assistance for people at all, especially in hinterlands. It was the prelature that brought religious and women and men from Europe to this work. Schools were built. Young people were brought from the riversides of the interior to schools to be trained as teachers. Afterwards, they were sent back to teach in their hometowns. Small health centers and hospitals were built in order to social assistance to be provided. After the Second Vatican Council and the reflection in Latin America, and especially after the meeting in Santarém, the prelature of Tefé, with the Spiritan Bishop de Lange, started adopting a new kind of pastoral, trying not only to help people, give them school and health, the traditional school, but show them the possibility of getting out of their situation, open their eyes to see the unjust situation they were living in, and the mechanism that kept them there. A rural education radio was formed. A whole organization was created to promote literacy and education of people living along the borders of the rivers. And a special pastoral was set up to defend the indigenous people and to promote the demarcation of their territory. This process is was accompanied by an organization known as MEB, M-E-B, the Basic Education Movement, which, as well as literacy training, gave formation and clarification about how society functioned and on citizens' rights. They adopted, they adopted the pedagogy of Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire is a great educator who developed a literacy method in which, at the same time at which one learned to read what was written, also learned to understand the reality, the mechanism of society, and that it is up to them to change it. We helped people to organize themselves. They used to live scattered along the rivers. We encouraged them to improve their living conditions, building their houses together so that they could have schools for children, adults, electric power, generators, health service, etc. By periodic visit and through the radio, we promoted the organization of the directory, a common council in which they could study the problems and look for solutions together. Another preoccupation was the Sunday religious celebration that strengthened the faith and unity. Above all, we insisted on regular meeting of small groups for reflection based on the Bible. Bible groups sought to read the Bible in a collective effort to which each one gave his contribution. In a first moment, they sought to understand what the Bible was saying. In a second moment, it was sought to apply to their life. Living conditions were discussed. Decisions taken in this condition had the characteristic of being both discussed and shared communally and supported by faith. They were therefore firm commitments. They felt also supported by the prelature and by the church. It was in the big biblical reflection groups that was born awareness of the problems affecting their lives and the possibility of changing that. One of those problems was the predatory fishing of large boats with freezing capacities. These boats caught fish, both large and small. And they then threw out the small ones when they found a bigger fishes, and those of lesser commercial value. Once caught in the net, they can't survive anymore. When a shoal of fish of great value was found, They threw into the river tons of what they had on board. This produced wastefulness and unbearable pollution in the rivers. The communities soon began to miss the fish that are the basis of their diet. People became aware that the water, the lakes, and the rivers were not only their roads to go from one place to the other. There we have no roads, I said, the whole prelacy. Or where they could dump all that did not suit them. The waters were the place where their food was and their livelihood came from. The communities usually live close to a lake on which they rely for their food. The basic food is fish and manioc flour. They started to defend those lakes, not allowing the fishing of boats in them. On the other hand, they started preserving other lakes for breeding in further away places. They avoided frequenting and engaging in activities there so as not to scare away the fish. Other lakes were considered to be free for commercial fishing. The struggle was difficult. The authorities were against us. It didn't exist specific laws on the subject. How to find legal support for the poor. The entrepreneurs of the fishing business put pressure on authorities. The community mounted guard day and night on the lakes. Every night one family was appointed for that. In front of, sometimes they put canoes with their family in them. And when family is in them, in front of the big boats to stop them from invading the lakes. They even took the fishing equipment from the smaller invaders, and in case like this, they took the equipment to the police in the city, but the police did not know what to do. There were some arrests that time, some difficult situation. They sought solution on two fronts. On one hand, seeking existing juridical solutions, and on the other hand, seeking to have new laws favoring preservation. The prelature provide lawyers to help on that. In the 80s, after 20 years of military dictatorship supported by American policy, there was a mobilization in favor of a new constitution. The church, with the support of the National Bishops' Conference, encouraged all of society to participate. Not in the sense of the church getting privilege for herself, like it happens actually by some so-called biblical group in the Congress, evangelical group that is seeking privilege for them. But the church used to incentivize people to have better laws better legal condition for a just society with opportunities for all. In our case, the riverside communities, with the prelature, present amendments favoring the preservation and proper use of nature sources, especially those of the rivers and lakes. For this purpose, we made partnership with other sectors and movements with similar views. The indigenous people, Afro-descendants, landless, rural works, etc. The struggle was also intense when it came the same thing for the constitutions of the states and municipalities. The communities organized a service of voluntary environmental agents to keep vigilance. We had a long and difficult battle in favor of preservation together with the riverside dwellers. We had hardly any official support. Seeing our work, some government departments realized the value of it and its originality. IBAMA, the Brazilian Environment Institute, for example, starts supporting our surveillance methodology through our volunteers. Our voluntary environmental agents were officially recognized. We trained them with courses and IBAMA recognized them by giving them official diplomas. The methodology was taken to other parts of Brazil by the government's own environment agency. Our team trained about 1,500 environmental agents, volunteers, agents in Tefé and several other towns and dioceses. By then, the international environmental movement was growing. International organizations start putting pressure on the government. Brazilian authorities, under the new constitution and the international pressure, produced new laws on the question. There was, though, great difference. Our communities were living the reality and tried, little by little, to create regulations that would solve problems. But distinct from the way we were going, governmental regulations were created in offices by technicians, very often without contact with reality. The official ecological reserves we have in Amazonia are of various kinds and models. The riverside people had already foreseen this when they classified preserved lakes as those. For breeding, nobody fished there, nor practiced any activity that would starve fish. Other exempted lakes reserved for community food needs, and commercial lakes free for commercial fishing. Among the official types of preservation there are biological reserves, those is called estação biológica, this one here. And another kind is sustainable development reserves, and extractivist or extractive reserves. These and It's a kind of reservoir that people living in them can use some resource with sustainable limitation. Then you see, oh, it seems back. Not too much. Now, and the other is flora, like this one. Is just forest preservation. Well, some are under federal, others under state responsibility. In our region, especially, we create extractivist forest. Extractive reserves were born through the struggle of the great leader of rubber trappers, Chico Mendes. This happened in South Amazonia, in the state of Acre. He became international in his struggle defending forest works and for his healthy livelihood in the forest. The riverside people in the Tefé region accompanied the development of this campaign with the support of the prelature. They went to participate sometime from those meetings. So they opted to this model. The Spiritans' brother Falco Michiels and John Derricks were very important in this campaign as they were in supporting their communities. The latter published 2 books on the subject. Several of these reserves were created in our region. The projects of extractive reserve were good. The communities saw in them what they had dreamed of, support for their effort in preservation, possibility of official approval of their products. They called managed, that's the exact word, products they could sell and export and so on. But we see afterwards that didn't work well. In fact, the executive reserves brought many advantages to nature and population. Lakes were better classified. The customs and forms of breeding of the different species were better studied, such as times of spawning and migration. Fishing is, the fishing in the lakes is well organized. Each year a quota can be withdrawn and sold. There is government financial and during the forbidden or off-season time, there are training meetings, scientific support. And we can see some products. The best one has appeared here. Pupunha is a kind of palm product, very important for food and animal food too. And that is another thing called açaí, is a precious fruit. And we have here the fruit on up, some machines or the manual preparation. It's very important for food, very rich in nutrients. And now it's spread in Brazil everywhere. The Brazil nuts, as you know, is one source of, they can extract. And cocoa, I don't know whether it's the exact word, that was a very important product in Brazil times ago. And now it's increasing. You have the fruit, the seeds, and the kind of bread they do manually of their chocolate. And the main, most important is manioc. I don't know the words, but seeing the photo perhaps you recognize. The men think for food. It's fish and manioc flour that they have. Then you have the product and the way to work it until arriving to the flour. Small products of agricultural products, and on the right corner up, you see, I don't know what can be seen, is a woman feeding a turtle. Very nice to be an Indian. And the preservation of nature is done by people that have conscience of that. And very nice to see how many birds, the birds come together, millions. It's very nice to visit those things, as you can see in the photo. And we can say people is a happy people. They are not tortured by consume, and has still now difficult on health care and all that. But when we meet them, they are very nice people. In the center is a very nice photo, the way they eat all together on the floor. Nice photo I took myself too. Then there are, however, some unresolved problems. For example, when permission is given, fishing has to be done in a few weeks. For this reason, the communities are obliged to sell the fish in short time and in a very low price. After more than 20 years, for example, efforts, sustainable timber extraction. It was a hope people had to commercialize in a rational way timber. But after 20 years, that sustainable timber extraction, a promise of great hope, has never worked. The legislation about this reservation was drafted by technicians very distant from the reality and guided by an environmentalism that I would call fanatical. I belong to the council, we say decision council of an extractivist reserve, where we have fought without success to get the approval of a management plan of timber extraction. The only permission people got was the use of fallen wood, dead trees. That would allow them to manufacture some nice objects like the one you see. But to make use of dead wood, a technician must be called from Manaus, some 600 miles away, must be brought to check the issue, register each piece of wood, and one after that you can make a request, and we don't know when it will be approved. Up to now, we had nothing is done. Another problem is that a simple connection of the communities by electricity cables is forbidden. So each community needs a generator, and it becomes so expensive that they can have electricity only some hours a day. And the electricity is very important not only for television, but to the conservation of food or all that. With all these difficulties, people get not enough work and have to go to town skirts and live a very poor life with no work. Enough work, only work they had was small, I would say, plants for beneficiating food, wood. And with the new laws, they can't exist anymore. The Mamirawa Institute, one of the first preservation experience in our region was the Mamirawa Reserve. It is in the region of Tefé. Resources for their work were received from foreign government source institutions that supported ecology. One of the institution's director, the eminent scientist José Mar Soares, was the author of many important books. The institute was fortuitous in its options. The people were taught and motivated to practice preservation, to deal with difficulties and reactions. They were organized in communities already by the work of prelacy. Many talented leaders were woke up and trained in both theory and practice by the prelature. The Institute adopted practically all the methodology and the organization of the communities, incorporating to the personnel men of the local leaders. They gradually perfected, the Mamira Institute gradually perfected their work with scientific studies and research that were locally tested. They also brought in research respecting the rights of the local people, and they were always preoccupied with social issues. Here we see a technician monitoring, if that is the word, the fish to know. They put some device on a fish, a torch, or so on, to start the migration of them, and very important thing for the conservation. Partnerships are very important in the work of preservation, very important. You have people and organizations that seek the same goal as we do and can be an important ally. But we must be careful because, as we have the experience, because we can be manipulated or co-opted for causes and interests with which we do not agree. As we know, groups and governments currently use sophisticated ways to invade, to steal, and take over. These are the so-called fourth generation soft power wars. In the case of the Amazon, a lot of wealth has been taken away in the name of scientific cooperation in the study of biological wealth, of protection of indigenous people. The NGOs are very important on this issue, such as deforestation, damage caused on construction of dams for the generation of electricity, They have helped a lot. But many questions are raised about underlying interests, such as commercial competition with first world corporations, interest in water that could run low in the future, as we saw here, and foreign governments' use of the soft power to facilitate future occupation without having to go to war, as has happened in the case of oil in the Middle East, as we know. So are some preoccupations. One question we ask is that many wonders if such great limitations are necessary in construction of dams for the production of essential energy in the world. Very important for Brazilian as a whole, and especially in our religion. This is a barrier they made for electricity production in near Bolivia. As you see, the level of water here and here is not so much. If you make a big dam up here, then the production will be continuous during the year. And like it is, the production is half or less, because half of the year the water is very low. You see, this very, and so those NGOs make big pressure, bring famous people there and so on. It is very good and helpful for the nature and so on. But sometimes we ask, is too exaggerated, you see? People not, our condition is not respected. There's some questions we put. Other questions about the ferocious opposition against electrical networks to the connection of cities or ever capital. You see in the case here. All the whole Amazon is cut from the electricity connection and other things like that. Then we, oh God. Now, here has Amazon Pará, and here the state of Amazon where I live. Tefé is around here. Here's the capital, Manaus. So it's many years ago I built a big plant, electricity plant here called Tucuruvi. But until now, that is 30 years ago, up till now we had not connection, you see, and all the electricity here is produced by oil and so on, because the cities here are like an island. So only now it arrived here, because the preservation homes didn't allow it to come. And now, and Boa Vista is the capital here of the state of Roraima, near Venezuela, here. Has to buy all the energy from Venezuela, and it's not possible, because here they don't want allow it to pass those connection for electricity. I hope you are understanding. Well, another thing is internet cables, very important. what is that? This optical fires. Yeah. All our regions is cut. Yeah? Big cities, towns, many. My own town, for instance, and nearly all of Muslim towns and villages are real islands in relation of internet, electricity, petrol, gas, and land communication. In our town, for instance, we need internet, but we have no cable, because it's not allowed to cut some trees to have that. For instance, to come here, I had to ask a visa from the American consulate or embassy. And it is all by internet. And it was very difficult because the connection is so slow with fall downs, and they have a big problem because of that. I nearly couldn't come here. And it's amazing. And some of those laws are too strict. It's a great problem. After you can make questions, so to go further. This is even the state capital such as Boa Vista, we saw here, in Roraima, lives this situation because they is not allowed to have roads, electricity, or things like that. International NGOs exercise enormous power in society and Brazilian government. They are important for their causes. I'm not criticizing everything they do, but they are handsomely financed by large corporation governments. Are they always exempt from other interests beside ecology? Hence the need for a careful discernment. Even with these difficulties, we are giving our contribution to ecological reservation. And above all, we are trying to have preservation that takes care not only of animals and plants, but takes care of human life as well, as Pope Paul says in his Laudato Si encyclical. Then I put some other photos, tortoise. It's a bird, very nice bird, called mutum. A photo by plane I took to show how much water we have there, and the hope of a better time. Yeah, that's it. Now, if you have any question, I asked Daniel Walsh, who was 4 years working there, and he will help me to answer. Then,
So we have a time for questions and discussion now, and Father Walsh will facilitate if there's a confusion in language, because Father Walsh speaks Portuguese. Okay? You stay here.
Yeah. You take the phone there.
I'll speak to you.
Is it okay if I ask him in Portuguese and then I can translate later? Okay. Oi, padre, boa tarde.
Boa.
Prazer. O meu nome é Bruna. Eu só queria perguntar para o senhor quanto da população em Tefé tem acesso à água limpa e filtrada? I'll translate later, guys.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't say, yeah. Well, he
Pode
asked
responder, eu
about
posso
water,
falar se
is it?
quiser.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that we have so much water, but to drink is a bit difficult. We cannot drink this water. As you see, there's a yellow water is with earth and everything that comes on it, you see? And all flat, the region. So the contamination is easy to happen. Even those gold miners and so on. And there is a problem that we have a source, a well, and during the flood occasion, the water comes up and cover everything, you see. There is a difficult situation for water. The proportion numbers, I don't know. But even the water we have from pozos, wells, you see, like my town, all what we saw yesterday, the pipes and so on are not well done, so the water is not good. We had a time we tried to make wells handmade, you see, and the prelature brought some people with an experience in another place, and we used to do that in the communities, and that works a little.
Obrigada.
Now, it seems.
Thank you so much for your presence here, Bishop. I wonder if you could speak to the numbers of people over the many decades who have died for their attempt to preserve both environment and a way of living. Thinking about, there was a recent death in Peru, I know you're speaking of Brazil, but across Amazonia of Chico, you had Chico Mendes there, but there's so many people who have been killed by corporate interests going into this area for those extractive industries, and just the role of the church. And I just wonder if you could speak to those many people who have given their life to try and preserve the creation.
Eu vou falar você. De fato, muita morte foi causada assim pelo povo que vivia lá. Já vem de longa data na questão da borracha.
Okay, he's saying that there have been many people who have lost their lives, and it goes back to the time of the rubber industry.
Quando a borracha tinha muito valor durante a guerra, que precisava, né, para fazer pneus e tal, então a borracha tinha muito valor. E então, para produzir borracha, matavam os índios para limpar a terra.
Back in the days when natural rubber had great value, it was a very big industry, and they exterminated a lot of Indians from the places where you could extract natural rubber.
E nos últimos anos, a criação de gado e a produção de grãos fez a invasão de grandes fazendeiros na região.
Now the Indians are being chased off of their land because of the work with cattle and grains like wheat farms.
The Indians and the other people working there, you see. And hoje em dia, o produto maior que tem é a produção de grãos, né? de milho, de soja, é o maior produto do Brasil que está sustentando a crise.
Right now, it's the farming of corn and wheat and soy. It's a big industry in Brazil.
Então, nesta luta, muita gente morreu, inclusive uma freira americana chamada Dorothy, que defendia os pequenos proprietários que são expulsos, foi morta lá.
Even there's a sister, Dorothy Stang, who's an American nun who is killed protecting the people from the interior in this struggle.
Com o governo Lula mais social, então houve mais a defesa desse pessoal. Mas agora está assumindo o poder a bancada ruralista, né? E também a bancada evangélica muito da direita.
Under the administration of Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, he gave preference to the people, the rural people and the poor. But now there's a section of government that is favoring the rural, large landowners and the evangelical vote in Brazil.
Os grandes proprietários, então, estão tomando força, sustentado por essa política nova, e há poucos meses toda uma região mataram todas as pessoas lá impunemente.
This large landowners now with their power are taking over large areas of land, and recently they killed many people in an area that they wanted to take over.
Há um mês, a polícia foi mandada para te retirar ocupantes de uma terra. E eles chegaram, simplesmente mataram umas 30 pessoas.
About a month ago, the police were called to dismiss people from a section or from an area of land, and they simply came and killed 30 people.
E a semana passada, uma tribo de índio sem contatos foram mortos por mineradores de ouro.
Last week, a group of Indians who had really had no contact with the outside world were killed by gold miners.
So in these places where there's no cars, is it hard I guess, are there doctors that will travel by boat to these communities, or are these people really just not seeing doctors for the majority of their life, unless there's a urgent need?
Nesses lugares onde não tem estrada, rua, como é que o pessoal encontra médicos?
Esse é um dos grandes problemas que o pessoal do interior tem, porque a comida, de algum jeito ou outra, eles conseguem peixe e farinha.
These people in the interior, life is very difficult. They can get fish and they can get the farinha, which would be the manioc or cassava flour.
A prelazia estabeleceu, uma irmã que fundou o hospital e tudo, junto com a prelazia, estabeleceu um sistema de agentes de saúde que foram bem treinados em Tefé.
The prelature has, through the help of a sister, have established like small clinics and pastoral agents for health that go out to help the people in the interior.
O governo adotou desse tipo de coisa, até pagava esses agentes voluntários, mas ultimamente com a dificuldade econômica está muito mal.
The government for a while was paying these agents who had been volunteers, but with the economic situation they're no longer being paid.
Então, uma dificuldade muito grande, às vezes dramática. Uma pessoa que teve um acidente e ficou sem uma perna, tinha que viajar de canoa, assim, durante dia todo para chegar em Tefé.
There was a person who had an injured leg, and it took them a day going by canoe to reach Tefé, to be attended to by a doctor.
Então essa é uma das dificuldades assim, muito grandes que a gente tem, não é? A questão de saúde.
Yeah, the question of health is a very big question. There's really not much that's done.
In that one slide, you showed these reserves, and I was wondering, are those protected and are they not violated by the landowners as in some of the other areas, like for instance where Sister Dorothy Stang was? When they form the preserves, are those sacrosanct? In other words, that they are protected? And if that's so, can they continue to create reserves in other places?
Estas reservas, umas funcionam bem, outras mal. Por exemplo, a de Mamirauá, que eu mostrei, ela é bastante boa.
Some of the reserves are very well respected. Mamirauá is well respected, but others not so much.
As outras, muitas vezes não tem mais recurso, né, do governo e tal, então elas ficam assim, sem condição.
Some of the others don't really have much financial support, so there's not a whole lot that is being done.
Conheço uma reserva, por exemplo, que está a 5 dias de viagem, então eles produzem coisas e tal, mas não tem jeito de exportar, né?
He knows of a community that takes 5 days to get there, and they produce things, but it's 5 days. You can't really get there to pick them up or collect them.
Tem muitas reservas que são criadas e terras indígenas, especialmente no Amazonas, onde está assim, mais desocupado, não é? E um problema que está existindo é a demarcação de terras contínuas, que dizem que é necessária para certas vivências de animais e tal.
There are many different these reserves, and the problem sometimes is if they're not contiguous, that it becomes a real difficulty.
Essa questão de terras contínuas, a gente sente muitas vezes que tem alguma coisa atrás, porque às vezes não é necessário tanta terra assim contínua que impede a vida das pessoas que estão do outro lado.
Yeah, in the last one, he was talking about some of the indigenous lands. And with sometimes what is behind it, he's asking, why do they have to be contiguous? What's behind it? Because people can't, if it's an indigenous land, it would bring up one set of questions.
Tem muitas áreas preservadas no norte, no sul, então estava indo bem. Agora o governo está, foram algumas ocupadas e agora o governo da direita está desfazendo e permitindo, né, a entrada de exploradores.
There, in the north and in the south, there have been reserves that have functioned well, but now the government is allowing other people to come in to exploit the resources.
It is often said that the Amazon are the lungs of the world, and that keeping our atmosphere safe depends upon the continuation of the Amazon being there. So do you see, is the destruction of the Amazon still advancing further west from the state of Rondonia? And is it extending into Tefe and the surrounding area, the destruction of the forest? And how do you see this as affecting climate change and the disastrous climate events that we have recently experienced?
Na nossa região não está sendo atacada a floresta, né? Então essa foto aí foi tirada na minha região, então é uma grande área coberta de floresta. O ataque está sendo no sul, como você disse, né? Está entrando no sul.
He's saying that in our area of Tefe, it's not being deforested. It's pretty far from everything. They're beginning at the margins in the south and clear cutting the forest from its margins rather than going into the center.
Então isso já está afetando muito o clima, a questão de chuva especialmente, embora tenha outras causas, mas no sul, onde eu nasci, né, no centro do Brasil, está secando tudo, né? Está uma situação muito difícil.
He's saying that the deforestation is affecting very much the southern part of Brazil. Bishop Mario is from the state of Minas Gerais, where there is a lot of drought.
E parece que é afetado exatamente pela destruição das matas, né? A região mais do sul, o ar sopra assim, vai nos Andes e desce. E agora aquele que era para nós passa nessa parte desmatada. E ali, então, tem mais seca.
The deforestation has affected the climate down there. The winds and the weather that would come from the Andes is no longer bringing the rains as it had in the past.
Que sobe na bacia amazônica, encontra os Andes e volta, né?
It comes from the Amazon basin to the Andes and then comes back down into southern Brazil.
E a parte que passa no sul do Amazonas vem para nós. Então lá está dando problema.
And the part that went to southern, the southern Amazon now comes through that area, his area.
So thank you for having the patience.